Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I've prepared a quick list video for all of you that I'm going to go ahead and call 5 DC comics that defied convention. These are just 5 different books that I thought really just took things in an unexpected direction or pushed the limits in a certain way. Now admittedly, it's been a minute since I've done a dedicated DC video, so I think I was a bit overdue. I can't wait to talk about the list today, but before I do want to shout out the channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, perhaps even some in this video, I highly encourage you to check out their website. You can find a link for it in this video's description, and if you see anything there you like, you can actually use my discount code at checkout, TheComicBookReport, to receive $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a fantastic way to support this channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's go ahead and get started with today's list. First up today, in no particular order, we have the 52 Omnibus from DC Comics. When I think of a convention-defying comic run, I definitely think of this series 52. For those that don't know, essentially what this is a 52-issue comic series that was released weekly across an entire year. What was really novel about this as well is that each issue that came out weekly was actually set in the corresponding week within the universe itself. So in issue 1, you read about the first week in this calendar year in the DC universe. You got the different days of the week and different things that happened along that week. And then issue 2, which in real time came out the second week, you would have the second week of that year. And so it went all the way through 52 weeks or 1 full year. Another really cool thing, this whole series happened in the wake of Infinite Crisis, which is this big company event over at DC. But during this year, for this series, we have the main 3 in the DC universe, Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. They're kind of away. They're out of the scene. And so we have the emergence of these other heroes and villains that kind of show up in the vacuum. One of the other cool things about this book is that it was a huge collaborative effort. We had so many writers and illustrators across this run, and yet there's this kind of unified vision for the world of 52. We had some cool, murder mysteries. We had some big science fiction high-flying plots, we had international intrigue, and so much more. This was such a fun read, and honestly, I haven't really read anything quite like it. The fact that it had kind of real-time elements and that weekly schedule, it just really pushed boundaries, and I liked that it was kind of linked to Infinite Crisis, but also was its own thing. I really also enjoyed the way it promoted some lesser-known characters and gave them the full spotlight. Characters like The Question, the emergence of the New Question. We had Black Adam, we had Booster Gold, we had Starfire and Animal Man, and so many more. Steel, honestly, the Steel narrative in this story was really, really great as well. Honestly, this was a fantastic run, and to have it all in this gigantic, oversized omnibus format was a real dream. I mean, even looking at some of the creators involved, like Geoff Johns and Grant Morrison, Greg Rucka, Mark Waid, Keith Giffen, and more, it really is just a treat. And I'm honestly surprised with so many different plot lines, different writers, creators. The fact that we have cohesion at all in this narrative, it is honestly just impressive. I think that this is a great book for any DC fan out there, especially if you like kind of getting a bit bigger, more full context for the DC universe at large. This is a great way to get immersed in the minutia or just kind of other details within the world. Again, outside of your main kind of A-list top tier heroes. Don't miss out on 52 from DC Comics. The next book I have here that I think defies conventions a bit is the Creature Commandos. Now, this trade paperback edition came out from DC this last year. I think it's an observation of James Gunn's new series that'll be coming out, the animated series Creature Commandos. Even though I know a lot of the characters in that aren't going to be maybe explicitly the characters in this book, they're certainly based on the kind of property here. But this is really fun. We have basically a collection of weird war tales from the early 80s set predominantly predominantly during World War II, where we have this team of, Task Force M for Monster, basically assigned to take out Nazis and other villains, and it's really just kind of a fascinating book. We have basically a Frankenstein's monster-like creature, a wolfman of a kind, a sort of vampire. Eventually we get kind of a robot soldier and a kind of Medusa Gorgon-like figure, all kind of led by this corrupted government official who basically was in charge of sort of experimenting on these people and turning them into these, quotation marks, monsters. I thought that this was fun. Honestly, it's in a similar vein as something like maybe the Suicide Squad or kind of your rogue kind of team. I will say that the actual monsters in this seem to be very virtuous or heroic. It's actually the team lead that's the most human, that is the most, well, inhumane or possibly villainous. But it is a fun book. I am still making my way through it, but everything I've read thus far has been really fun. I think that this is kind of an underrated gem as well. I know if, like me, you're a fan of the kind of universal monsters in a way, this is really a must-read title. I like that in the big two, Marvel and DC, every so often you get these fringe releases that, not a lot of people showcase very often, but when they do, you just get to see these kind of fun, weird pockets of this world. I think also the way they sort of updated the monster mythos or made it their own was also really fun. Like the vampire here is not a true vampire, but he basically has kind of vampire powers. He can turn into a bat, he has to drink blood, but it's sort of through synthetic experimentation. It's not like he's, like a straight up vampire from mythology or whatever. He was experimented on and created in this way. Similarly, the Wolfman we have in this is totally an experiment as well, and basically he has a situation where he can't control when he becomes the wolf or not, and oftentimes in combat or in the midst of their missions, he'll revert back to his human form. This is really a fun kind of novelty. Again, I like these little wrinkles in the mythos. It definitely lends something to the storytelling, a lot of fun twists and turns. Now, I will say we don't necessarily get a ton of depth for these characters. I am interested in kind of later iterations of some of this because I wonder if we get a little bit more characterization. But if you like little fun kind of one-off adventures, this is definitely a fun book. A really eclectic and interesting team, and it does make me excited to see what James Gunn is going to do in the DC universe using this property. Definitely kind of a convention-defying little book here, especially if you're used to DC Comics being predominantly your tights and flights mainstream superheroes. A fun little pocket here, and one I thought I'd showcase. Next up on my DC Comics list, we're going to be talking about Flashpoint Beyond by Geoff Johns, Jeremy Adams, Tim Sheridan, Ermanico, and more. So this is a follow-up to the original Flashpoint event series, but in my mind, this is where they defied convention a bit. I don't know what I expected from a Flashpoint sequel, but it certainly wasn't what we got in the pages of this run here. Now, I do have just the standard paperback of this. I did do a full review on my channel a couple months ago, but honestly, this is a book that stuck with me. I don't know if I loved it right out of the gate, but it has left an impression. And the more I think about it, the more I think it was pretty, I don't know if brave is the right word, but pretty daring of Geoff Johns and company to approach Flashpoint in this way. The first Flashpoint event was this kind of sprawling epic where we had Barry Allen, the Flash, coming to this alternate universe and basically trying to stop kind of impending wars and trying to kind of revert the world back to the way it was, and it just had this grand kind of scope, and it felt larger than life, a true big kind of company event or crossover kind of book. But with Flashpoint Beyond, we have a bit of a more humble story. For the most part, this really follows Thomas Wayne's Batman, who is in the Flashpoint universe and is trying to basically solve a murder. It's a much more intimate kind of storytelling, and the scope feels a bit more narrow. I think that was the first way this kind of bucked my expectations for what a Flashpoint sequel could be. Now, it does have larger implications, especially by the resolution of the storyline, but I think kind of making it a whodunit with an almost noir kind of feel just felt really daring for an event book like this. I do also think focusing on Thomas Wayne was definitely a masterstroke. That was honestly one of my favorite facets of this book, was that we got to follow him for a bit. I really did like stepping a toe back into the Flashpoint universe. I wasn't sure we'd ever see it again. So when Geoff Johns and team decided to return here, I was already pretty eager. Now we do have some larger impacts and ramifications for the Flashpoint universe that we see across this, but again, it feels a bit more focused and a lot less grand compared to the first event. I also think it's just such a departure from what we got with Flashpoint, that huge story following Barry, that I just really think it's an admirable sequel. This is really a sequel in the vein of sequels that don't just rehash the first one. You know what I mean? Whether it's in film or in comics, sometimes sequels can really just be almost the same kind of scripting or general same plot, just maybe new characters and kind of change things just a bit. But this is a sequel that really kind of reimagined this world or what it could be. It's more of a different chapter within the universe rather than a full sequel. And I really appreciated that. I really think that that left a bigger impact on me than just a true sequel, and I think that that is really how this defied convention, at least in my mind. I would be curious to see, for people that have read Flashpoint Beyond, what was your takeaway from this? What did you enjoy or maybe fail to enjoy about it? I'd love to get some discussion going on that, because again, this is one that's just kind of stayed with me. Next is a book I have loved talking about since I read it. That, of course, is Aquaman Andromeda by Ram V and Christian Ward. Now, this book is part of DC Comics' Black Label, meaning it's intended for more adult or mature audiences. Sometimes the narratives are a bit more sophisticated, and they don't always fall within the actual mainstream continuity. I think that's the case here with this 3-issue little series. It's given in this great oversized kind of boxy format, and it's just a real dream. For those that don't know, Aquaman Andromeda is a total science fiction kind of psychological cosmic horror, I guess is how I would describe it. And honestly, it's that play of genre mixed with, I guess we'll call it an Aquaman story, that really showed me how much this defied conventions, at least in my mind. Aquaman Andromeda is essentially about this object or space that's found at the bottom of the ocean floor that basically a team of like scientists and different people are tasked with kind of taking a submersible underwater, trying to find whatever this thing is on the ocean floor, this mysterious metal, and along the way they encounter Aquaman and some of his villains, but they find that this object is a little bit more than what it appears to be. We go into people's heads and we get to see just so many people fray at the edges. It really is a fascinating book that reminds me of something like the movie Sphere, if you ever saw that, but it is a really fun play with genre. It's intensely character driven, even though most of the primary characters are invented for this storyline. While it is an Aquaman story, he's more of a secondary cast member for most of this, I would say. It really is more of a human story following those that are on this journey under the sea. The art from Christian Ward is surreal and amazing and absolutely matches the overall tone of this book perfectly. It's broody, it's mysterious, and it's a little bit eerie. You never feel totally comfortable reading Aquaman Andromeda, and honestly, that's one of the ways that I think that this is just a stellar read. Going back to the art for a moment, though, the art here from Christian Ward, and admittedly this is the first time I've ever encountered Ward as an artist, but I think that what he manages to capture in these pages is so striking. I think there's a kind of art style we associate with most like superhero-centric comics that's a bit more defined, and even with all that variety, but what we get here is so, I don't know if impressionistic is the right way, but we definitely see some stylization choices that isn't as conventional in your mainstream titles. Like even other Aquaman works I've read, some have had great art, but it's not like this. This is so dreamy and kind of fantastical in its way, and I loved that. That's another way that this book just bucked convention for me. I don't know what I expected to get from this title, but it was so much more than what I even hoped for. If you haven't read Aquaman Andromeda, and my numerous videos haven't convinced you to yet, consider it one more time. It is that much fun, and maybe it's not for everyone, but it certainly was for this reviewer. And hey, while I have your attention, if you're enjoying this video and you've yet to subscribe to the channel, I would just like to invite you to do so. I'm always doing comic book lists, reviews, unboxings, and more. Anyway, thank you for considering. Now on with the show. Okay, and last but certainly not least on today's video, we have Superman, the Warworld Saga by Philip Kennedy Johnson, of course, again from DC Comics. Now, this book is another one I'm still making my way through. I'm definitely a good chunk into it by now, and I am loving it. It absolutely lives up to all the hype I have heard about it, and so much more. Now, this little paperback here, or I guess big paperback, includes the full story arc. I know that this should be collected in an omnibus edition, I think next year, if I'm not mistaken, but this is marvelous. Essentially, what this story is at its core is a Superman story that really pushes him beyond his norms. Trying to save an enslaved race on a foreign planet, Superman goes to rescue them, only to be depowered and thrown into a kind of gladiator-like existence. What I love about this story is we have Superman out of his element and really not functioning in the way Superman often does, but you get to see his resilience and character shine through. I really love the way Philip Kennedy Johnson took Superman so far beyond what we usually see in a normal Superman story, and it really just mixed it up for me in a way that, you guessed it, defied convention. I will say there is a story arc, I believe, during the John Byrne era of Superman, where I think Superman goes to Apocalypse for a bit, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, there's a storyline that feels kind of similar to this, so it's not like it's completely unprecedented, but in modern Superman history, this is definitely one of the more unique and longer story arcs I've ever read, and I've really loved the ride. I've always been a Superman fan, but I know a big complaint people can often give to Superman is when you have a character that's almost unstoppable, how do you have that sense of tension or stakes, and is it still as entertaining? And while I do think that most good Superman writers find their ways around that or how to navigate that or make the story about something more than that, I like Philip Kennedy Johnson's approach of just removing some of those powers that make him so super so that you really get to the core of the character himself and see how he can still triumph in these circumstances. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the supporting cast of characters we had with Superman. We have members of the Authority, and then of course there's so many other characters that Philip Kennedy Johnson introduces throughout this run, but it's all really great. The art as well, I just think is fantastic. We have some artists in here that almost have a painted kind of pastel look to it. I don't know how to describe it, but I really liked it. I thought it was extremely gripping. We do have, of course, moments that are beyond this kind of gladiator planet as well in this narrative, particularly at the beginning. But yeah, overall, this has been such a fun read so far. I think if you're someone who's wanted to get just lost in a Superman story, to dive in deeply, and you want something a little bit different than maybe the squeaky clean standard Superman stories you're used to seeing, I highly recommend the Warworld Saga. Like I said, it's kind of a fish out of water kind of narrative, and it just works for me. And now while I haven't read Planet Hulk, I imagine it's in a very similar vein. So perhaps if you've enjoyed that story, maybe this is a Superman story for you to check out as well. Okay, and with that, we're already going to begin wrapping up 5 DC comics that defied convention. I did have a lot of fun putting this list video together. It's been too long since I've really jumped into the waters of DC Comics, which I do have a great deal of love for as well. This prompt I also thought was just kind of fun. I tried to focus on selections that I don't believe are in everyone's kind of top 5, top 10 list videos. I also just generally thought this would be a good way to showcase just different pieces of my collection that don't often feature in many of my videos. Some, of course, have been in a few, or there's ones like Aquaman Andromeda that I probably overshared, but I just really love that book. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this list video. You'll have to let me know, are there DC comics for you that you think defied convention? Do you have comic book recommendations? Let's hear all of that in the comments section. And again, thank you so very much for watching. Until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave your like, that comment we talked about, and maybe share this video with a friend. Thank you so much, and have a good one.